We see it over and over again. We tell stories. We talk about the grower that we worked with to do this, or the plantation that we did that on, or the water we're saving in this plant or that plant. But it's not an overall strategy. And that's one of the things we really struggle with in our world in large agriculture. And what I'm going to try to do is to sort of take you through some of the things we've been trying to do over the last 4 years or so to develop more of a strategy as opposed to anecdotes. If you look at our footprint, or by looking at our footprint, we were able to make some decisions about where we wanted to focus. There are many, many ways in which sustainability can be attacked at a processing facility in particular. We looked at our distribution system. We ship over 400 million miles a year of goods. So that's a lot of gas. And so one of the things we looked at is what can we do to reduce that? Then we've actually reduced it by about 15% now. That's 56 million miles. It's, maybe a drop in the bucket relative to some other things, but it has value. We looked at packaging. Steel packaged cans are the most efficient product we could possibly be in. They last forever. They're completely recyclable, and the product is okay in it. The problem is nobody wants it. So what we're forced to do, because still it's the third leg of the stool is economics, we're forced to still go in and look at other options, and that largely involves plastic and foil, various packaging products that are not as recyclable. So one of the things we're striving to do is work with our suppliers to do something more recyclable and from more recycled products. Processing, there's lots to be done in a processing plant. Energy reduction, water reduction, waste reduction. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at there. But when you really look at it, 70% of the footprint of our final product, when it's sitting on the shelf in the store, comes from agriculture. That's water footprint and energy footprint, primarily. So it starts with agriculture. I've mentioned that we have the traditional supply chain role that we are in a domination supply chain. A little uncomfortable with that term, but we're in a domination supply chain. In particular, when Walmart says jump, we say how high. So we are. That's part of our whole supply chain structure. We are not yet at a point where we have partnerships as a driving factor for us, but I think we can get there, and I think we are not yet a monolith, as much as I know, and we have many situations in which we have good relationships with our growers, long-term relationships with our growers, and loyal relationships, and we work together. That's actually part of my job. That's what I do, is try to build relationships relative to technical support. So one of the things we're looking at is how can we work with growers, improving yields, reducing the risk of our pest management programs, optimizing fertilizer use, optimizing irrigation. The question becomes, is all this sustainable agriculture? I mean, is that what this is about, or are all these anecdotal stories? This came from a pollster who has worked some with the food industry, and he put, it's related to defining sustainability. He said, put a gun to my head and tell me to give you a one-sentence definition of sustainable agriculture, and I'll tell you to pull the trigger. In the context of large-scale production agriculture, what exactly is sustainability? I know I struggle with that. I know our growers struggle with that. When we go out and speak to a grower, what we hear is, my family has been farming this ground for 4 generations. That's sustainability. And I think you'll all agree at some level that's true. So what we ask in turn is, will your grandchildren be able to do the same thing? It's a different world. You're farming in a different world than your grandfather did, and your kids are going to farm in a different world or your grandkids will farm in a different world than you will. And it's going to be a resource-limited world, it's going to be a crowded world, it's going to be a world with less land. And how are you going to make sure you leave a sustainable legacy? I've got to tell you, it doesn't always work, but it's a great line. The way we look at as trying to do a number of different projects across, I'm going to go through this real quickly, don't worry about the details, but Del Monte is, we are of two minds. We are, or let's say we're Catholic in this whole thing. We're willing and open to all possible options, and so those options, anything that drives us to more sustainability, we're going to be there. We're not selling romance when it comes to agriculture. It's a different world. And so we're looking at emerging technical-based product opportunities. We're looking at innovation. We're looking at remote sensing, at plant breeding, at automation and robotics, all those kinds of things. But at the same time, we have also learned a lot from what you do and what the world of organics does. We did produce some organic product for a while. We produced organic peas, beans, corn, and tomatoes. You know, people who buy organic don't want to buy canned fruit from Del Monte. So it wasn't all that successful, although we did nothing to promote it. So who knows if anyone actually knew we actually produced it. But it was a great learning experience. And one of the things we did is find out, gee, these guys actually have some really great ideas. It was a little expensive, and we're trying to incorporate some of those ideas, particularly the soil building part, into the process. But, you know, growers, as one gentleman mentioned, are an independent bunch, even here in the continental United States. And it's not always easy to make those changes. We're also looking at, so we're looking at those kind of bio-based, more progressive and regressive at the same time options. Needs to be fundamentally driven by resource reduction, though. That's the kind of thing we're looking at. In terms of breeding systems, we are largely conventional, our breeding programs. We do a smattering of genomics. We're interested in marker-assisted breeding. We do no transgenics. I sometimes think that's unfortunate because I don't believe that the concept of biotechnology and transgenics is necessarily evil. I don't think we should be judging the process. I think we should be judging the final product. That being said, our customers aren't ready for it. Our consumers aren't ready for it. And so we don't do that. And we'll see how that all plays out. I think if you look through this list of items here, you'll see that a lot of these are really beyond the capacity for the germplasm of any particular species to achieve. And so that's where I think transgenics may have some opportunities for us. You know, one of the things I put down here is we had a newly developed white mold resistant variety. I think I showed this slide 3 years ago to the listening session. It failed, not due to white mold, but due to yield and harvestability. But we have more coming along, and when we get there, it's going to be a great opportunity. Pest management, I think David Pimentel at Cornell is the one that says that 99% of pesticides actually never reach the target. Well, there aren't many targets out there really relative to spraying over top of a field, but it's a bad idea nonetheless. I don't know if it's 99% or if it's 80% or what the number is, but the fact is we shouldn't be broadcasting pesticides. It's a bad idea. So what are we doing about it? And those are the kinds of things that we're constantly looking for opportunities to minimize that option. We do with a biological underpinning. We rely on weather. We rely on windows of exposure. But we're looking more and more at new opportunities relative to remote sensing, to host plant resistance, beneficials, and the kinds of things that you all do. I think we merge the ideas together to really develop a very integrated pest management opportunity. Nutrient management, 50% of nitrogen and probably a lot more of the phosphorus never actually reaches the plant. I think we're all aware of those kinds of problems we're facing. We need to build nitrogen usage efficiency in our our planting systems. And we're moving to those kinds of things. In water management, same kind of thing. Water use efficiency is extremely inefficient under current situations. Right now, about 95% of our tomato growers have gone to drip, and it's a huge opportunity. Now, drip's expensive, and so it may not be the right solution in every situation. But we've been able to reduce water by 10%, and I think that's probably a low figure. We've increased yields by 20%, and I don't know what the nitrogen utilization, but their numbers seem to vary a lot, but it should be a lot better because you're focusing the water on the root system. More words to live by. Larry Kagan again. Consumers want sustainable agriculture, but are under no obligation to define it. And one of the things we struggle with from growers is, well, what is sustainable agriculture? What do you want me to do? What are you asking us to do? It's something that we struggle with on a regular basis. We drive it because I'm a scientist. We drive it through technological solutions, but I think it's something we need to work on. So, what are our opportunities and challenges? And I always thought this was a funny thing, this opportunities, all challenges are opportunities. I don't buy that, actually. I think there's a lot of challenges. They're just challenges. They're not opportunities. They're a pain. But, this is certainly the way we speak in industry, so, it's what I have to say. Does our customer really care? Does our customer really care? I know your customer cares. You've proven it. You're here, you're marketing your product, you have a customer that cares. Does our customer care? Does somebody who buys canned peas care if we're sustainable or not? It's a really good question, and I don't have a really good answer. I know that Harvey Hartman up here in Seattle, his group did some studies, and what they say consumers really want is health, care about, is health and community, more so than the environmental things we do. So one of the things we have spent a lot more effort and time on recently is the social leg of the stool, not just the environmental leg. That's the part, again, that's, scientists love the environmental piece. It's not easy by any means, but it's tangible. The social piece is a lot harder, and everybody wants to stay away from that. So does the consumer really care? I think they do, they just don't necessarily know it yet. Do our execs and investors really care? That's another question. But I'll tell you what, if the consumer cares and the investors and the executives hear about it, we'll care. And that's what needs to drive a lot of what we do, is how do we drive consumer understanding of the kinds of things that we, number one, do, and that's not necessarily in a positive sense, and number two, can do in a positive sense, in fact. Can we break the stranglehold or myth, as Fred called it yesterday, of a cheap food supply? The kinds of things we're proposing can be quite expensive. And it is clear that a cheap food supply is a bit of a myth because the expense comes in the externalities, and particularly the social externalities. The fact is, when it hits the shelves at Walmart, it's cheap food. And that's something we have not been able to shake, and that's something that has to change. Can we create a conventional values-based supply chain? There's been some discussion, and I know Gail today is going to talk more about values-based supply chain. It's a little different than the way I see values-based. I'd like to think that our supply chain actually understands and cares about the values that we bring along from the production of food all the way through to the shelf. So how do we develop that as part of the whole conventional supply chain? I think our goal in this process is, as Carl said yesterday, just to become less of a problem than anything else at this point. Who will be our future farmers? You know, I look around here and I think I'm looking and I'm talking to the future farmers. When I talk to industry, as has already been mentioned, there are few people under 60 years old. And they're pretty traditional in their values. Well, the values are fine. They're pretty traditional in their thought processes. And one of the things that I would like to see is the kinds of things you're doing, the kinds of ideas that you are building within the community to spread out throughout. And I've heard some really great instances of where that's in fact happening. It just needs to happen a whole lot more and a whole lot faster, because there is that sense of urgency right now. And finally, the question we're here for is what sort of infrastructure will it take us to get there, and how do we stop the current erosion of infrastructure that we have right now? Well, I don't have a lot of great solutions, you want to know the truth. I do love the idea of the 50-year Farm Bill. I think right now the Farm Bill is the most screwed up piece of legislation we have in the United States. And it has done nothing but move agriculture in the wrong direction for its first 50 years or whatever, and that needs to change. But I also understand fundamentally how Washington works, and that's not going to happen anytime in the near future. But I still think we need to ask for it. So I wanted to sort of give some thoughts. Okay, what do we do? How do we pump up the infrastructure? So this all came as I was noodling over this late last night. It's like, and I don't have any great solutions, but I think number one, consumer education. Fred talked about active food participants, and we need way more of that, way more active food participants. They need to ask the right questions. Our consumers need to ask the right questions and demand transparency. We're starting to see that already. Thank God for social media, because it's really changing the dynamics of a way of old-fashioned national large agriculture distributor like Del Monte thinks about their business. And luckily, it helps drive some of the things we've been trying to do, because people are asking about the way we grow our food. And they're coming to me and asking. And I'm saying we don't have good answers. So we have a lot to do, and it's a real opportunity. The 50-year Farm Bill, we need to end subsidies, or we need to apply subsidies in the right place. We need to apply subsidies in research and education, and we need to supply subsidies in small business production. That's what's going to drive change. We need to tell the good story. One of the other things that the Hartman Group talks about is that it's not about local, it's about locale. That it's about the story you tell. And the more stories we tell about agriculture and the kinds of things we're trying to do, and the kinds of things, I think at this point, I'm probably going way over, I apologize, but you know, most people particularly in cities, now I have to admit I live in Oakland, it's kind of the epicenter, or one of the many epicenters of the food bubble, and the Bay Area is it's a strange place to live. In the Bay Area, I'm a conservative. Everywhere else, I'm a liberal. I have no idea what I am actually, but they're interested in the story behind things. They don't really care if it came from Northern California or Washington or the Northeast. It's about why was it developed the way it is. And so that's one of the things we really need to work on as an industry, to let them fundamentally understand what farmers do. I think there's this sense that farmers are either hayseeds with overalls and a pitchfork, or guys that climb into a plane and spray toxins all over the earth. And I don't think there's any fundamental understanding of what farmers have been doing over the last 40 years to really improve their situation. We're by no means where we need to be, but we're making a lot of progress. And finally, we need to build values-based supply chains that provide the broadest application, not just in your world, in the ag of the middle world, but across all supply chains or supply networks or whatever they are. What I see here is, when I look around here, is what I think is the leading edge of agriculture. I know we are slow followers, not fast followers, but I do think what we all need to do is assure that that we all follow that same path and move us along to a more sustainable agriculture.